Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Heli Hypiä, and I work as a climate policy and green economy counselor here at the Embassy of Finland in Washington, D.C. I would like to warmly welcome all of you to this virtual event titled The Role of Forest Bioeconomy in the Green Economy Transition. The Embassy of Finland organizes this event today together with the European Union delegation to the US in Washington, who we partner with gladly quite a lot. Thank you to all our excellent speakers agreeing to share their views with us today. Even though we live in extraordinary times at the moment, we wanted to take this opportunity to virtually do what we can, so to say, to advance transatlantic partnerships in the field of green economy, and we hope you'll enjoy the event. We certainly need international partnerships more than ever right now. So without further ado, I'll introduce our fantastic moderator, Ms. Dana Eidsness, who is the director of the Maine North Atlantic Development Office and a highly valued partner and friend to the Embassy of Finland. Through our recent active cooperation with the state of Maine on issues of climate action and bioeconomy, we've really enjoyed the opportunity to work with you, Dana. So thank you again for agreeing to be our moderator today, and please take it away.
Thank you, Heli, for that warm introduction. Good morning and afternoon, friends. Welcome to my living room in beautiful Orr's Island, Maine, USA. We have speakers joining us today from Finland, Brussels, Arkansas, Michigan, Maine, and Washington, D.C., and over 200 guests from around the world. We're very, very excited to have you with us. So, right along here. So today, as Heli said, our speakers will discuss the role of forest bioeconomy in the green economy transition. So that is the idea that sustainable management of our renewable forest resources and full resource utilization toward development of value-added products and a goal of zero waste will help us achieve thriving green economies. You're going to hear a lot today about the importance of transatlantic partnerships, that there are communities that are trying to achieve similar goals towards bioeconomy development, and that collaboration could help us all get where we want to go faster. The relationship between Maine and Finland is a real-life example of a transatlantic partnership. After several years of outreach and collaboration, the state of Maine signed a Memorandum of Understanding, or an MOU, with the government of Finland in October of 2019. This June, we were planning a trade and study mission to Finland, which would have allowed us to study Finland's bioeconomy. It would have been led by our governor, but unfortunately, due to these present circumstances, it's been postponed. But we would have met with policy leaders, businesses, academia to answer the question, how did Finland transition from a pulp, paper, and wood products economy into a robust biosolutions, bioproducts, bioeconomy in just over 10 years? How did they do it? How did Finland get the policymakers working with industry and academia to move forward together? It's quite significant what they've accomplished. So we'll explore some of this today with friends from Michigan, which signed an MOU with Finland in March of this year, and Arkansas, which is making great strides in the development of mass timber and forest management. Our friends from the EU have a lot to say about green recovery as well, so we're looking forward to having them in the conversation. With similar objectives toward bioeconomy development, using this experience today to build a network that shares models of success will help us to fast-track solutions. So as we begin, one note of housekeeping, and to help keep this webinar interactive, attendees, we do want to hear from you. Please locate the question box or the big question mark icon and click on that and type any short question you have for the panelists as we go along. We'll be monitoring that box and sharing those questions with our panelists. If your question is for one speaker particularly, please type their name within the question. My partners wanted me to let you know that this webinar is being recorded and all or portions of it may be shared in the future by the Embassy of Finland. So with that, on to the program. We're going to begin today with recorded opening remarks by ambassadors of EU and Finland to the United States. Ambassador Kirsti Kauppi of the Embassy of Finland to the US in Washington, D.C. will begin the program, followed by a recorded message from Ambassador Stavros Lambrinidis from the EU delegation to the United States. Neil, you can cue the video.
Dear friends, welcome also on my behalf. I'm very happy to have such a distinguished group of panelists in both panels today. Discussion will be lively, I'm sure, and will identify hopefully areas where we can find concrete ways to cooperate more in the future. Special thanks to moderator Dana, who has been a terrific partner for Finland and instrumental in building our more institutional relationship with the State of Maine. The advantage of the virtual seminar is that it allows us all to come together in the same space despite the situation. We have people viewing from Finland, from Brussels, and of course in many places here in the States. We are always at the Finnish Embassy very happy to cooperate with the European Union delegation and my great colleague Ambassador Lambrinidis, as we did actually last year when Finland held the EU presidency. We had a lot of common projects and campaigns, all of them related to sustainable development. While we are still in the middle of the corona crisis and we are all shocked by the terrible human loss that it has caused, we must also plan how are we going to recover from the deep shock the virus has caused, not only as far as health is concerned, but also very much global economy. This represents a huge challenge in many ways, but it's also an opportunity to make sure that we recover in the right way, that we get it right. This is also an opportunity. And we think that we must put green recovery and sustainable stimulus to the center stage. The transition to cleaner and greener economy is absolutely necessary. The EU has proposed its own Green Deal, and Finland has committed to becoming carbon neutral by 2035. This is the way the global economy as a whole is developing and needs to develop to protect our environment. The change requires a whole of society approach. This summer was the deadline for all the different industries in Finland to create their own roadmaps on how they will become climate neutral, or better still, climate negative. The green economy transition is also a race where we need to be ahead to ensure our long-term competitiveness and that of our economies. Europe and US are at the forefront of innovation and development of clean technologies. We would both benefit much if we found more ways to work on the green economy transition together in the transatlantic partnership. Today's topic is forest bioeconomy. The topic is quite natural to us Finns. 3/4 of Finland is covered by forest, and forest-based products bring more than 20% of our total export value. A sustainable forest-based bioeconomy has a positive impact on climate when it produces innovative bio-based substitutes for fossil-based products and increases carbon sequestration. Finland has been a frontrunner in European bioeconomy, and it has taken a strategic long-term approach to make our forest bioeconomy the modern and economically vibrant industry that it is today. You will hear more from Permanent Secretary Jaana Husukallio from our Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry about how this all came about. It does require a whole of society approach as mentioned earlier. Soon you will hear excellent speakers emphasizing the various angles of expertise and roles needed from government to business and to research. Finland has begun to build transatlantic bridges in bioeconomy and green economy, and that we have done through two recent partnership agreements, one with the State of Maine and the other with the State of Michigan. We are very happy how both of these have started with active contacts in policy level, research, and also business sector. And actually this event is a testament to that great cooperation that has been begun. Finland is an active promoter of circular economy concept, bioeconomy and clean technology, both domestically and internationally. We will continue to promote these priorities within the EU, in our international partnerships, and multilaterally, for example, both in the WTO and OECD. At the transatlantic level, we could look at opportunities to cooperate in making sure the international trading system and norms promote growth of green industries and bioeconomy in the best possible way. We must make sure that products and services in this sector are able to move freely. So thank you once more for joining us today. Enjoy the panels and take part actively. Next.
Dear friends, greetings from the EU residence in Washington, D.C. Grateful to the Finnish Embassy for organizing this timely event in cooperation with the European Union delegation. And let me welcome all participants from across the United States as well as from Europe. Three general messages. Message one, COVID or no COVID, the EU will not slow down on delivering on biodiversity and the EU Green Deal. Today, we face simultaneously two existential threats to humanity, COVID and climate change. And for better or for worse, we are called to address them simultaneously. This will require tremendous focus, resources, resourcefulness, and political will. And the European Union stands up to be counted. Now, during COVID, we have already taken unprecedented measures to save lives and to protect livelihoods together, the European Union and our 27 member states. And while this is still our immediate and overwhelming focus, our work continues on delivering the European Green Deal. We do this because the climate crisis and biodiversity loss are real and present dangers that require a continued attention. They are intertwined with our health and well-being, both of which are tested in an unprecedented manner these days. And we do it because assuming that those dangers will somehow go away after COVID, that our forests will keep growing and our air will keep being fresh in the midst of unsustainable economic exploitation and climate change, well, that thinking guarantees that the full effects of climate change, sooner than later, will inflict human and economic costs on our societies that may make the tragic, unprecedented costs of COVID pale in comparison. Now, the latest steps in delivering the EU's Green Deal are the EU's 2030 biodiversity strategy and the EU's Farm to Fork strategy, both published on May 20th. The biodiversity strategy puts the EU in a leading position to address the global biodiversity crisis. It highlights how the green transition can deliver a way out of the current crisis that is much more resilient for our farmers, fishermen, and countless other professions that depend on nature. The Farm to Fork strategy aims to reward those farmers, fishers, and other operators in the food chain who have already undergone the transition to sustainable practices, enable the transition of others, and create additional opportunities for their businesses. Measures number 2, biodiversity is good for business. More than half of global GDP, mark that number, half, about 40 trillion, depends on nature, including forests. And of course, forest bioeconomy is the topic of today's seminar. Did you know that? 40 trillion. But while we take nature's inputs for granted, remarkably, we do not value them as other economic inputs, such as labor or capital. This has to change. Nature restoration will be a central element of the EU's recovery plan from the coronavirus pandemic and will provide immediate business and investment opportunities for restoring the EU's economy as well. 3 economic sectors will be key in that recovery: construction, agriculture, and food and drink. Together, they generate more than 7 trillion of the EU's GDP. And keep this in mind too. 6 industries, chemicals and materials, aviation, travel and tourism, real estate, mining and metals, supply chain and transport, and retail, consumer goods and lifestyle. All of them depend through their supply chains on nature for more than 50% of their gross value added. Not pursuing biodiversity conservation now means condemning them to a very bleak economic future indeed. Now, friends, in this process, the EU will help to build a European business for biodiversity movement and to make this movement an integral part of the European Climate Pact. Why? Because it is foolhardy to assume that we can exit the dark COVID days of the 21st century by investing in the black, polluting, and nature-destructive economic ways of the 20th century. It will be throwing away good money on investments that do not have anything but an expiration date. Final message. This has to be a global undertaking, and we want the United States to lead with us. Now, in the last decade, the EU and its member states collectively upheld their commitment to double financial flows to developing countries for biodiversity. We are ready to continue working with our partners and further increasing our support post-2020. Let me give you one example, Africa. The EU will launch the Natur Africa initiative to protect wildlife and key ecosystems while offering opportunities in green sectors for local populations. Similar projects will be developed in other regions, such as the Western Balkans. Now, the European Commission will also mobilize all tools of external action and international partnerships for an ambitious new UN Global Biodiversity Framework at the Conference of the Parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity in 2021. EU trade policy will actively support and be part of the ecological transition. And just this March, the Commission launched the Global Biodiversity Coalition of national parks, aquariums, botanic gardens, zoos, natural history and science museums to help raise awareness around the world on the need to protect and nurture biodiversity. We hope many in the US will come along. Now, we will share our plans and encourage our partners around the globe to raise ambition too. We Europeans can lead, and we are, but we cannot do it alone. So thank you again to my colleague and friend, Kirsti, and to the Embassy of Finland for taking this initiative. Thank you for spearheading the effort to build transatlantic biodiversity bridges. They will help carry us over to a much more hopeful, much safer, and much more prosperous world. Bye-bye to all.
Okay, thank you, ambassadors. And Special thanks to Kirsti Kauppi. I think I got most of my circular bioeconomy and bioeconomy education from programs at the Embassy of Finland in DC. There's been a great lineup over the past year. So thank you, ambassadors. Now for our two panel discussions. I will briefly introduce each panel topic and the panelists, after which they will each make brief presentations, followed by moderated discussion and Q&A. You'll find detailed bios for all of our speakers in the event packet you received from the organizers yesterday. And again, to submit questions for our panelists, please enter them in the questions box on your screen. So panel one is a policymaker's take on the role of forest bioeconomy in the green economy transition. It's my honor to briefly introduce each of our esteemed panelists, and then each panelist will have 10 minutes to present, followed by high-level discussion and questions from the audience. So with us today, in panel one, we have Ms. Jaana Housu-Kallio, who's been the permanent secretary for the Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry of Finland since 2012, and has seen the span of development of the modern Finnish bioeconomy from the first national strategy published in 2014. She's also made a long career previously in the European Commission, and she's a dear friend to the state of Maine, so happy to have her here today. Next, we'll have Congresswoman Shelley Pingree, a Democrat from Maine. She serves on the U.S. House Committee on Agriculture, the Subcommittee on Conservation and Forestry, and Subcommittee on Biotechnology, Horticulture, and Research. She also serves multiple caucuses, including the Biomass Caucus, and as co-chair for the Food Waste Caucus and Sustainable Energy and Environment Coalition. We have Congressman Bruce Westerman, a Republican from Arkansas, with us today. He serves on the U.S. House Committee on Natural Resources, is a ranking member for the U.S. House Water Resources and Environment Subcommittee, and Congressman Westerman is the co-chair, co-founder for Working Forest Caucus. Ms. Amanda Beal is Commissioner of Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry for the state of Maine, and it has a long history and interest in food systems related projects and sustainability work. Very happy to have Commissioner Beal with us today. And we have Ms. Shannon Hanna, who is Resources Deputy for Michigan's Department of Natural Resources. There she oversees Michigan's wildlife and fisheries, state forests and state parks, minerals, and law enforcement. So with that, that is your panel for panel one, and we will begin with Permanent Secretary Housu-Kallio. We'll begin with you. The screen is yours.
Dear Diana, thank you very much indeed. I'm more than happy to share the discussions with the colleagues over the Atlantic today, and it was of course a privilege to hear the honorable ambassadors to take the lead for our discussion. And indeed, Dana, as you said, it's wonderful that you said that I'm a good friend of the state of Maine. I had my first visit there, and I'm very grateful and touched about the hospitality and the friendship I got from you personally, but also all the expertise surrounded me and my colleague from Luke during my visit. And indeed, it was an honor and a pleasure to see that we opened, or we paved the way for the memorandums of understanding by the signature of the Prime Minister of Finland with the Governor of the state of Maine, and that was followed by our sister ministry, the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Employment with the state of Michigan. So I think that is a very, very good start. And with this webinar, we are now continuing it in a more concrete way. And I'm very pleased that also in the second panel, my really respected colleague Antti Asikainen will for sure go more into technical details and professional expertise in the area of the forest bioeconomy. But indeed, it is a pleasure to be here today. As we heard from the ambassador of the European Union, indeed a lot is going on and happening on EU level, and and the circular bioeconomy, as we call it in Europe, is really a great tool when the societies are aiming at carbon neutrality. And our own ambassador already has shown you the very ambitious targets by 2035 for my own country. So we strongly believe that the circular bioeconomy can really boost a green transition and sustainable economic growth. So the real target is to get the balance with the economic growth and the sustainability. And we strongly believe in Finland that that is a possibility also for a country covered by forests, as the ambassador Kirsti Kauppi already mentioned. Also during my visit to Maine, I want to repeat that I'm very proud that as a very horizontal, over the ministries happening work, we have a national bioeconomy strategy since 2014. And I'm pleased to say that it is now in the process to be updated, and the time frame is that it will be ready by next year. And I'm sure that we are also going to take next steps in the basic work, Dana, that you were referring to, that how from the old forest-based work we have moved into a modern bioeconomy state. And when I was thinking about, the Finnish history, I have to say that one thing that I remember from my childhood was when we heard stories about people leaving from Finland to the United States over the Atlantic. I'm very much aware that the very first people worked actually in the forests over there. So I think that now it is a new modern world, but we need to follow that these steps that our fathers or grandfathers already have taught us. But today the figures from the Finnish side are indeed impressive. So dear participants, in 2018 the output of the Finnish bioeconomy was 73 billion euros, and that comprised 17% of the total output of the national economy. So in the Finnish scale, indeed, these are big figures to be mentioned. And the forest sector continued, of course, to be the footing of the bioeconomy, and it accounted about 40% of the output and the value added of the bioeconomy. So we still say that Finland lives from our forests. And the forests provide, of course, wood and non-wood materials, but at the same time, of course, the nature tourism and even hunting and game affairs are very, very close to our hearts and part of the forest bioeconomy, at the same time as we are talking about running sustainable ecosystems around the country. But wood processing has remained really, as I mentioned, a very important sector for Finland, and even today over 20% of the value of Finland's export revenue comes from the forest sector. So we are definitely depending on our exports, where the forestry and forest production plays a crucial role, and therefore a crucial role for the well-being of the whole society. But as Dana, you mentioned in the beginning, of course, the world has changed, not only by the people leaving Finland to work in the US forests, but the Finnish forest industry has really announced new investments and projects during the past few years. During my working life, also in money, these have been bigger than ever. And of course, as in the past and even today, manufacturing papers and packaging materials and sawn wood are crucially important. There are more and more new products available, and the innovations linked to alternatives for fossil-based plastics is ongoing. We are interested even in healthy nutrition and ingredients coming from forests, and definitely the circular economy is closely linked to the forest bioeconomy as such, to be able to use the material again and again. But as I already mentioned, everything starts from the strategy that has to be made on the governmental level. And in addition to the bioeconomy strategy, we have a long tradition of national forest strategy. And I'm very, very proud that the stakeholders really involve the whole area. So it is not only civil servants or the industry working in the forest sector, but also the environmental experts are very, very warmly taken on board in the work. And the linkage to what is happening in Europe is very close, of course. So it is related to the European Union's own forest strategy and the very new updated European bioeconomy strategy as well, where the targets are very much the same as in our national work. And then just briefly to mention, because I'm sure it is going to be on our discussion later and perhaps in the second panel even more, that when we are talking about climate change, we definitely talk about forests as well. And we definitely know in Finland that forests are an important carbon sink, and I'm sure that is the discussion you have there on the other side of the Atlantic ongoing as well. But climate change also affects the forests for sure, with storms, with hard winds, and even more and more with fires. Fires can be good, but they can be really, really terrible, as we have seen around the world. And based on the Finnish initiative on the United Nations level, we are celebrating the International Year of Plant Health. So we know that the forests are also depending on health. So there are plants as flowers and all the material produced for our food as well. So we need to take care of the health of the forests as well. And the climate change is a risk for that in many ways, for pests and different kind of microbes as well. So dear Dana, as my last point, trying to be on the time frame as the first speaker, I'm really welcoming the more concrete cooperation between our countries, between the different states over there and Finland. And there are many things I'm sure we can work on with. One of them for sure, and that is linked to the climate neutrality, is the construction. So how we're going to use wood construction. I'm sure there's plenty of things for collaboration in that. And then in the area of these new innovations, Finland is working very much and hard on wood-based textiles. We are not too bad in the second generation advanced biofuels either. And for the food and also other packaging, safe and sustainable packaging material is something that we have, and our industry has paid a lot of attention and also a lot of money, and I hope that could be also something that we could cooperate with. So from the Finnish point of view, our universities, our technical people, and also the government is more than willing to continue and increase the cooperation with you colleagues over there. And I'm sure that also during this day we will find opportunities and possibilities also to pass the message onwards to show how huge opportunity this kind of cooperation really is. And indeed, once again, I really enjoyed my stay in Maine, and I'm really looking forward to the visit of the governor to come to Finland with the delegation, so that we can show how things are in here and how much in common we really have. But I wish everyone a very nice discussion today, and I'm looking forward to see that we can go as much as possible to the concrete issues as quickly as possible. So with these words, dear Dana, I conclude.
Thank you so much, Jana. Wonderful. So I'm going to invite Congresswoman Shelley Pingree to the screen now. You have 10 minutes.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Thank you to everybody. First, to everyone on the panel and everyone watching. I hope your families have been healthy and safe and continue to stay that way. Thank you to Dana for organizing this. We're very proud of all the work that you've done in Maine, and we're so sorry that you're not able to visit Finland right now, but look forward to the Maine delegation going ahead to do that. I'm pleased to be on this panel with so many wonderful people, and I got to be quick here, so I won't go through all of them, but happy to have our own Commissioner of Agriculture and Forestry on the panel from Maine, and also to join my colleague, Congressman Westerman, and appreciate the good work he's done on the Working Forest Caucus. Just a little bit of an outline. Obviously, we know how important forestry is in the United States. The impact of forests in our country is about $300 billion in products annually and employs nearly 1 million people. And we have somewhat of a similar situation in Maine. Our forest industry today is worth about $8.5 billion and employs about 33,000 people, which is a lot in a state of 1.3 million people. But just like at the national level, we've seen a challenging downturn. I think in the last 20 years, we've lost about 30% of the jobs overall in the forestry industry. And in Maine, we had a particularly hard decade, not unlike what we've learned about what happened in Finland. That we in our state, about in 4 years, 6 of our paper mills closed, which was quite devastating, loss of about 5,000 jobs. And that really caused us to go into a tailspin. And thank you to some of our good friends in Finland, and thank you, Madam Secretary, were a big part of helping our state to rethink what we were going to do in the future. So I just want to talk a little bit. We're going to have our own Agriculture Commissioner, Agriculture and Forestry Commissioner on later. So we both kind of look at this, I think, through a Maine lens, and I will too, but I want to try to focus a little bit on the federal issue. Forestry plays such a key role in states across our country. We're very diverse, but we also understand that the role of our forests is critically important in climate change. In a recent year, the growth in the United States forests offset about 12% of the carbon dioxide emissions for our country. So that gives us a sense of how critically important they are as we go forward and work on climate change related issues. And coming from Maine, the most forested state in the nation, we know not only does this play an important role in our own state, but also in the health of the forests overall and in the role of being a carbon sink. The best way to maintain those forests is to keep them economically viable, to have that level of investment and attention in our forests. And as I said, much like Finland, we've had to do a lot of rethinking, and the federal role in that has been particularly important. As Maine jumped into this endeavor of rethinking how we handle our forests, we were lucky to have an Economic Development Administration grant, a federal grant, to go through what could be new ideas and how to deal with the economic collapse that we were facing in our forest products industry. And that is a similar issue to what is going on in national in forests around the country. Now, on the climate change front directly, obviously we are thinking very much about the role of forests in our climate change provisions, but right now in Congress overall, we're not actively engaged in our climate change plans, mostly because we are focusing intensely on the coronavirus, and it needs to be that way. And also we have some differences within the Congress about how to move forward, but the House does have a special select committee on climate change. They've put together a massive proposal. It was about to be released just as we, shut down and changed our focus. I and my office have worked quite a bit on the agriculture side of that. And we've written an entire bill on the Agricultural Resilience Act, and are certainly looking at things related to forests. One of our key components of that is on preserving land, understanding the importance of the soil in sequestering carbon, which is very similar to the idea of our forest growth sequestering carbon as well. But since I'm not going to get into deeply on the proposals we're working on because we're at a different point, I want to focus on the federal work that we do in just improving and enhancing our forests. So you heard mentioned earlier, this is a role that I'm honored to be participating in at the congressional level. I serve on the Agriculture Committee. We just recently held in our subcommittee a hearing on working forests and about innovation in the forest, an issue that hits us all across the country, even in areas where forest fires are taking our forests. It's all about what to do with what's left behind, and how to move into the future. And I also serve on the Appropriations Committee, and the funding for the Forest Service comes through the Interior Committee, subcommittee, and so I've been very involved in the funding for our Forest Service, which is critically important. So that's a little bit about my role. Just a small aside, I happen to live on a small farm on an island off the coast of Maine, and thinking about our own history here, if you came in the 1800, well, if you came earlier than that, in Maine, all of our tall pines belonged to the King of England, and no people were allowed to harvest them except for the king. Then in my community in the 1800s, there would have been 300 thriving year-round island communities, and most of the forest lands were cut over to take to our lime kilns. They were burning lime to make cement, and so a lot of it was cut over. It became a thriving sheep growing area. When that disappeared, the trees have grown back up, and we're in a predominantly spruce fir forest. And on our farm, we practice agroforestry, and we cut a lot of our trees to burn in our year-round greenhouses to fuel them. We use the wood chips as soil amendments in part of our compost, and use them for a variety of uses. And increasingly, this combination of how farms and forestry work together, I think, is a critical part of our rethinking about this. In terms of our funding in general, most of all, our Forest Service needs to fund things related to the health of the forest. In many ways, that is directly related to how we handle forest fires. That's a big challenge in our country right now, and certainly impacted by climate change. Also, invasive species, changing of species in the forest. Invasive species can do tremendous damage to many of our healthy forests and make them that much more vulnerable to forest fires, again, damaging to the environment and a real loss in the economy of those communities. Another major part of our focus, and something that I'm particularly interested in, is how we increase innovation opportunities and fund those through the Forest Service and through our agricultural programs and other areas. And I know we're going to talk a little bit more about that, and we've certainly been able to learn a lot from the work that's been done in Finland, but many of the good ideas that people will be talking about today have been part of our innovation strategy. There's language in the 2018 Farm Bill that looks at how we rethink our forests and how we support that kind of tall buildings, tall wood buildings, a whole variety of other things. And also the Timber Innovation Act was particularly important, recently passed, that looks forward into that. And just to mention a few of those areas, again, I think some of my other panelists will talk about these things, but one area of great interest, both for us here in Maine and around the country, is cross-laminate timber and the opportunities for building and construction. Really important to climate change and the economy. It's a great new use of a building material. It also is a substance, it's a material that stores the carbon in the building. Unlike steel and concrete, it doesn't use fossil fuels. And so it's a good way to look into the future, and another great way for states like ours to have healthy, innovative products that will employ a lot of people. Nanocellulose and all the cellulosic products are well known to a lot of people who care about these things. I was just recently thinking about one of the projects in Maine is an attempt to get more of the nanocellulosic materials used in plastics, particularly things like plastic water bottles and things that are disposed. And as we go through the COVID-19 and are focused on not using reusables, but actually using more plastics to keep people healthy and safe, this would be a really critically important product that if we could have it and better used right now, because it would allow us to use plastics that were made from a healthy material, not something that would end up in our environment forever. I'm particularly interested in one of the projects in Maine around a wood-based installation. We have a great young company here that's using a model from Europe. This product has traditionally been made in Europe, and it's part of a softwood residues turned into a building insulation. The insulation business is an $11 billion industry, so there's a lot of room for growth in there. But this uses wood products, but it also means that it will constantly, the carbon stays in your building and sequesters forever. And the current plan for that company, hoping that nothing in the economy messes it up, is to have $100 million in revenue eventually and 120 employees, and be very competitive with insulation in general, in forward-thinking building, and also with European similar products. Wood energy and heat is used quite a bit in our state, and there are great, clean energy techniques going into the future. Another great opportunity is in biochar, and a lot of research is being done in that because I'm intensely interested in how the soil sequesters carbon. This is a product that can be used as a soil amendment going down the road to help that soil hold even more carbon. And in the process of making it, it also produces oil and synthetic gas. So it could be a complete closed cycle because you can actually produce the gas that fuels the heating process in the facility. So so many of these good ideas, and so many of them funded by innovative programs to fund technology, research, to fund our land-grant universities that are working on these things. I will say, as a member of the Appropriations Committee, the United States doesn't do nearly enough to support this. We have a variety of innovative programs that give small grants, and our state has taken advantage of many of them, and I'm sure other states around the country. But I think that's got to be from our congressional side, one way that we make a much stronger pitch to have more funding, more of these innovative programs, support our Forest Service overall. While we do have a healthy, thriving, working forest caucus, there aren't enough members of Congress who think about these things, and we need to engage them more. So pleased to be a part of this panel. Looking forward to hearing from everyone else, and thank you so much for including me. I'm looking forward to working with all of you on these issues in the future.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. Okay, up next is Congressman Bruce Westerman from Arkansas. Welcome.
Well, greetings from Arkansas, actually from Washington, D.C. I'm here back in D.C. because we have votes this week. But Dana, great to be with you. Yana, Shelley, Amanda, what a privilege to be part of this panel. Forestry, or the bioeconomy as we're calling it today, is not just an interest of mine, it's a passion of mine, having grown up in the forests of Arkansas, having made my living working in the forest and with the forest before I came to Congress. And then in Congress, I'm the only member of the House of Representatives that's actually a forester. I have a forestry degree and I'm licensed as a forester. So these issues are near and dear to me, and it's just a privilege to be with this group today to talk about forestry and what the outlook for the future of that is. I know many of you have been cooped up like I have during the pandemic. Fortunately, back home in Arkansas, I've had an opportunity to get out and enjoy the forest, but I've also got a book I would recommend. This book is the Proceedings of the First American Forest Congress of 1905. Fascinating reading to someone like myself who loves forestry. It was one of the first coming together of the minds about forestry in the United States. And again, that was only in 1905. So it tells you that the science of forestry and the implementation of forestry practices in the US are relatively young. But really the who's who of American forestry were at this Congress. It was keynoted by none other than President Teddy Roosevelt, the father of conservation. Names like Gifford Pinchot, Toomey, and the list goes on and on of the forestry giants of the past who spoke at that conference. And I bring that up because I see forest today as an old friend, an old solution to new problems. I think we can go back to the forest and create a great bioeconomy and also address many of the needs and the issues of today, including climate, including housing needs, including commercial building needs, and a variety of other products that Shelley so greatly outlined in her presentation. I wanted to share a particular passage from that book and a quote by a guy named James Wilson, who was the Secretary of Agriculture in 1905. He said, "Forestry is not a local question. It is as wide as American jurisdiction. It is not a class question. It affects everybody. It is not limited by latitude or longitude, by state lines or thermal lines, by rivers or mountains, by seas or lakes." And it's forestry that brings us together today. And forestry is a question not just on the state level or on the national level, but it's an international question. And, you know, as I look at the panelists today and I see where everybody's from, the connections that we have, you know, when you look here in the United States, look at Maine, look at Arkansas and Michigan. You know, Maine was the 23rd state admitted to the Union in 1820. Arkansas was the 25th in 1835, followed by Michigan in 1837, I believe. Arkansas was actually 1836, I should know that one. But, you know, 3 states right in the middle of statehood, 3 states that have beautiful forests, different types of forests, different ownerships of forests, but nonetheless, it's the forest that I think really connects us. And then Finland, I've had an opportunity to visit Finland back when I was doing engineering and forestry work. Beautiful country. I would say thank you to Finland for giving Arkansas Peter McKeith, the dean of the Fay Jones School of Architecture at the University of Arkansas, where I did my undergraduate work in engineering. I know that Peter has a connection with Finland. He did a lot of work there. I also have ties to Yale, but we've both got a love for wood and forest, and you'll get to hear from Peter in the next panel. So as we look at forestry in America, and Shelley did a good job of telling you the total amount of forest, the economic impact that has, and I wanted to break that down a little bit more into to Arkansas and what we see is happening in Arkansas. And then I want to talk to you about some work that I'm doing in Congress and some exciting things that I believe are there for the future. But, you know, as we consider forestry, I want to just share with you one other quote from that first American Forestry Congress. It was from the ambassador to the U.S. from France. His name was J.J. Jasseron, and he said the forest has one singular and providential advantage over most of the earth-produced elements of our industries. When we have exhausted an iron mine, a gold mine, an oil well, a supply of natural gas, when the oil has been carried in immense pipes from Chicago to New York and from thence to our private lamps, it is finished. We can consume the thing, we cannot make it. Not so with forest. It is in our hands to improve or impair them, to kill them, or to make them live. And I think what we all want to do is see forests thrive, and because there's so many benefits to healthy forests. And I know that that's what a lot of my work focuses on here in Congress. And I think Arkansas, my home state, has a great story on healthy, thriving forests. You see, agriculture is the #1 largest segment of our economy in Arkansas, and forestry is the largest single segment of our agricultural economy. It accounts for about an economic impact of $6 billion per year, employs around 28,000 people. And we are fortunate to have about 12 billion trees in Arkansas. And we have a very vibrant forest products industry, everything from sawmills to plywood to OSB to pulp and paper. And we have wonderful working forests there, forests that produce these materials that are needed so that these manufacturing jobs can be there and so that we can meet the needs of a nation who depends heavily on forest products still to this day. Arkansas has got about 19 million acres of forest land. It's about 58% of the state is forested. The biggest part of that is private land, which makes up about 81%. But we also have a large swath of public lands in the state. Over 2 million acres of U.S. Forest Service land. We've also got U.S. Fish and Wildlife refuges and national parks. And then we have some state land that makes up about 2.5% of our forested land. So a big variety of land. Again, we have the private working forest, both non-industrial private and the industrial private ownerships that are kind of the backbone of timber production. But we also have beautiful national forests that are multi-purpose, just like the working forests are multi-purpose. And we all know that a healthy forest means good air, good water, good wildlife habitat, and the benefits go on and on for that. Briefly want to talk to you about legislation that I'm working on here in Congress. It's called the Trillion Trees Act, and that name Trillion Trees probably sounds familiar to you. A fellow Yale colleague of mine, a little later on in life, Tom Crowther, did a postdoctorate fellowship at Yale, and he kind of took the world by storm last summer when he published about how we could plant 1 trillion trees globally and reduce 2/3 of the equivalent to 2/3 of the man-made carbon since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. So the Trillion Trees Act is kind of a takeoff of that, and it's the U.S. response to get involved in the world efforts to plant 1 trillion trees by 2050. And that's something that's certainly doable. We can argue about how much carbon it actually sequesters, but we know that trees are a great carbon sink because they take in carbon dioxide, they give off oxygen, and that marvelous process of photosynthesis, they're able to store carbon in the wood. This table that you can hear me knocking on that's holding up my computer, it's 50%, 40 to 50% by dry weight carbon, and it's carbon that was stored in wood a long time ago before the wood was ever harvested to construct this furniture. And wood is really the most sustainable building material that we have. So our forests offer us an opportunity not just to sequester carbon while they're growing, but also to store that carbon long-term in mass timber buildings. We're seeing that in Arkansas, the work Peter McKee's doing at the University of Arkansas, and recently Walmart has announced they're building their new corporate headquarters in Bentonville, Arkansas, about 3.5 million square feet, 17 million cubic feet, or excuse me, it's about 17 million tons of carbon will be sequestered in that building when it's completed. So some exciting things happening. I'm excited to be working on it in Congress. If there's anything, it should be a bipartisan issue that we can all come together on. It's healthy forest and sustainable building. And it's just been a pleasure to be with you, and I look forward to hearing from the other speakers since my time is obviously up. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Congressman. Yeah, that Walmart project is a real game changer for mass timber in Arkansas. I hope we can hear more about that. It's very exciting. Thanks so much. Okay, Commissioner Beal from the state of Maine. The screen is yours.
Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone from Maine, and I should say greetings wherever you are, whatever time of day that it is. And before I get started, I first just want to share our appreciation here in Maine on behalf of our governor, Governor Janet Mills, and the Department of Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry for the opportunity to be part of this webinar today. This topic of the forest bioeconomy and its place in the green economy is very important and timely, and we really appreciate the work of everyone who made this webinar possible. So let me just start out by saying that in Maine, our forest resources are incredibly important to us, historically, now, and in the future. And for those who have not been to Maine, to give you a picture of what it's like here, we are a state comprised of about 21 million acres, and approximately 18 million of which are covered in forest. And in addition, we have about 1.3 million acres of farmland. And as Congresswoman Pingree made a great point of noting a little while ago in her remarks, the forest land is a very important part of many of our farmlands as well. And I can attest to that, as on my own farm, my own 35-acre farm, the majority of that land is actually forested. And I also have to note that we have nearly 3,500 miles of coastline, or more than 5,000 miles if you count our islands, which is, of course, very important for our fishing industry. And this year, we are celebrating our bicentennial, our 200th year as a state. And throughout our history, all of these natural resource-based activities have played a really central role in our economy and in our everyday lives. Today, the forest industry here is valued at more than $8.2 billion and supports nearly 40,000 jobs. And that's a new number. It's a little different than the number that Congresswoman Pingree used, but that's from a report that's coming out, so she didn't have access to that just yet. But that is our current count. And with that, the overall growth in Maine's forests exceeds our annual harvest, and that has been the case for quite some time. And in addition, about half of Maine's forests are certified as well managed by the Sustainable Forestry Initiative, Forest Stewardship Council, and the American Tree Farm System. Our diverse forest industry, from biomass energy to pulp and paper to lumber to engineered wood products, supports actively managed forest lands that help protect water quality and biodiversity. And even beyond that, our forests are resources that enable other activities that are very important to our way of life in Maine, from providing wildlife habitat to being the setting for hunting, fishing, camping, and other recreational activities. It's also really important to note that our working forest lands are predominantly privately owned. So the spirit in which access is granted in so many places for people to enjoy these activities, I think it really speaks to a sense of cooperation and trust in sharing the benefits of these lands. We also know that our forest resources play a critical role as carbon sinks, and that this has been an increasingly important thing to recognize as we look for meaningful responses to climate change impacts and ways we can play a role in mitigation. Governor Mills and this administration is strongly committed to addressing the threats caused by climate change. And in fact, last year, within her first 100 days in office, the governor took some concrete and important steps in that direction, including joining the U.S. Climate Alliance, which is a bipartisan coalition of 23 states aiming to uphold the goals set out in the Paris Agreement, and then by establishing the Maine Climate Council, which is made up of various state departments and other stakeholders from around the state. And the charge of the Climate Council is ambitious as it needs to be, which is to essentially reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 80% and to become carbon neutral by mid-century. And over the past several months, several subgroups of the Climate Council have been working diligently to develop strategies to meet aggressive targets for greenhouse gas emission reductions. And I personally had the privilege of co-chairing the Natural and Working Lands Work Group, where we've been having deep discussions with a well-rounded group of committee members about the opportunities that exist for sequestering carbon and reducing emissions because we have such a rich natural resource base. And those conversations have really coalesced around the important role our conserved and working lands play in our ability to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and to sequester more carbon. And integral to that potential is a healthy and thriving forestry sector, where we're actively looking for ways to enhance sequestration opportunities through land management and harvesting practices, and also through the promotion of forest products, particularly in areas where we can replace other materials, such as building materials, that have a greater emissions profile with wood-based products. We know there is real opportunity on this front, both domestically and internationally. And despite current challenges, many of us here in Maine maintain a positive outlook about where the forestry sector is going. This has everything to do with the innovative thinking and collaboration taking place in Maine over the past several years that put our forestry industry on a really positive trajectory before COVID-19 emerged. We've definitely felt the impact of shifts in markets due to COVID-19, but I do think that many of us are optimistic that we will persevere and continue to make progress in further strengthening and diversifying our forest products industry in ways that make sense for Maine. And now I won't delve too deeply into the ways in which that has already been happening here, as my colleague from the Department of Economic and Community Development, Charlotte Mace, will be speaking about this in more depth on the next panel. So I don't want to cover ground that I know she's planning to. But I do see us poised to recover that momentum. And part of that optimism also has to do with the memorandum of understanding that our governor signed with Finland last fall, committing to looking for ways to work together as we share similar outlook on the importance of the forest bioeconomy, as well as other similarities, such as beautiful natural and working landscapes, extensive forest resources, a similar climate, and many shared core values. This MOU opens the pathway for us to be thinking about how to collaborate meaningfully and to look for opportunities to support our mutual goals, whether looking at shared research opportunities, data and information sharing, or working together to create market opportunities. We are very excited about the possibilities. And I think it's agreements like this that really highlight the potential and importance of international partnerships and how we can all work together to support the development of a robust bioeconomy that benefits us all. So I will stop here in the interest of time because I'm looking forward to the opportunity to have some discussion during our question and answer period.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. We have one more speaker in this panel, and that is Ms. Shannon Hanna. She's the Natural Resources Deputy for the Michigan Department of Natural Resources. Shannon, the screen is yours.
Thank you. Hopefully you can hear me. I think my mute came off. It is a privilege to be here today. I love all of the themes coming from each of the speakers so far, and I'm going to touch on some of those things here for Michigan. I'm in my office finally for the first time in months, so this is good. So here in Michigan, we have a couple big initiatives going on in relation to forest bioeconomy. One of the big things we're working on that I would love to partner with many of you on is renewable energy generation and storage technologies. So we are looking at everything from renewable energy technologies on our buildings to help in the green conversation, and also large solar arrays throughout the state. We have quite a bit of state land here in Michigan. We have the largest state forest system in the country, which Donna will talk about a little bit more on the second panel. She's from Michigan as well. And then also an over $20 billion forest products economy here. So she'll talk a little bit about that. But the renewable energy piece, we need to look a little bit more into policies that will help us to promote that here. And so we've been looking at some of the policies in obviously other nations and other states to try and help us build that piece of our platform here. We also want to, Finland is a leader in battery technology, so we wanted to really collaborate and share potential solutions in regard to battery technology as well, as long as that makes sense for all the parties involved here on the renewable energy conversation. And lastly, on renewable energy, we also have a lot of wind, biomass energy facilities here, and obviously solar coming on board as well. So we want to partner in some of those ways that you guys are doing in your different areas throughout the country and other countries as well. One of our big climate change conversations has been reforestation. So we plan a little over, as the state here, we plan a little over 6 million trees per year in Michigan, but we want to look at expanding that in a better way. I know that Finland has really good reforestation efforts and can potentially help us reduce costs in that way. Our private landowners don't reforest very much here in Michigan. We have over 20 million acres of forest, and only 4 million of that is state and a little bit of federal, and the rest is private land. So we don't have a lot of the same policies that are needed to reforest much of the landscape here in Michigan. So we would love to partner on some of those things. We're also looking at selling carbon credits off of our state forest system. So we want to look into that conversation. We have some current proposals out for companies to help in that conversation and what that would look like. So as far as our climate change platform, we wanted that to be one of the things that we pursued. And if any of you are working on the carbon credit conversation, that would be helpful. That is a big bite to take off of an elephant of climate change. It is very complex, we're finding, and we're not sure where that will go as far as selling carbon credits off our state forest system here in Michigan, but we really want to explore that more, and obviously that will require some policy changes here if we can get them. So any insight on that would be great as well. Next, I wanted to touch a little on mass timber. Some of you have already talked about that. We have some great ideas for mass timber here in Michigan. We have a mass timber building at the Michigan State University campus right now, and we were going to have a mass timber summit this spring, which didn't happen because of COVID-19, but we're hoping to reschedule that. I carry around, I have a little mass timber block here that I explain to people what CLT is so that they can understand that with technology. And we also need some different policies here in Michigan to help with that conversation, to change some of our construction trades to utilize mass timber. So the summit is, when we do get to reschedule it, it's going to be on site at a mass timber building to help contractors understand what it means to use mass timber and how they can start to incorporate that into their building projects. So it was supposed to be kind of a kick the tire approach to have contractors come and see the building, see the people in there, see all the subcontractors in there, how they work with the mass timber. So we're hoping to continue with that. We also had mass timber building design being worked on for a new Department of Natural Resources building in Newberry, which is in the eastern Upper Peninsula. For those that don't really know that much about Michigan, we have two peninsulas. One is the UP, sorry, allergies today. One is the Upper Peninsula and one is Lower Peninsula. So Newberry is in the eastern Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And so that would help us kind of showcase the forest products industry in Michigan and really get people talking about wood products. So we're hoping to still be able to move forward with that after some of this COVID-19 wave goes through. The other thing we need for mass timber policy is, I know I believe in the European nations, you're allowed to use hardwood in CLT construction. And our policies and law here don't prohibit that, but we don't have the right mix of hardwood species yet to build CLT here. And we really would love to get that. Michigan is over 69% hardwood. So if we can attract a company here that can do that in hardwood, that would be really great for us. I think the closest CLT we can get is from Maine. Or on the western end, I think Montana is the next closest. So we're trying to get something right in the middle here that we can proliferate mass timber in Michigan and the production of that. We also need a little bit of assistance or help in greater recycling policies for wood, paper, and other non-wood materials to recapture that and reuse the carbon-intensive materials. So we needed to sort of look at other technologies and share. Would love to see some of the policy frameworks that all of you have to incentivize that recapture and reuse of those materials. And so I feel like we're a little bit behind in that, and we need to sort of bolster that conversation forward. One of the big things here in Michigan is we're dual certified in our forests for forest certification, and we also want to maintain that sustainable management. Again, I talked a little bit about private land, that we need a little bit of help in the private land portion of this to really bolster the reforestation conversation, because there are a lot of timber is taken off private land in Michigan by our mills and companies. However, as I said before, a lot of that reforestation doesn't happen because it's too expensive for landowners. So we want to find some secrets and some help in that round to really make it or incentivize that to really make it worth their while to reforest. And we would love to also, in our MOU with Finland, to exchange information on some of your procedures for inventory and monitoring and decision support systems for us to help in that conversation. So, and then one of the other big things on that note is the education of private landowners and how you go about doing that, especially in Finland with 3/4 of your country forested. And some of the mandates, I talked with some of the other meetings I had with some of the folks in Finland, some of the mandates you have on reforestation on private land there is just really amazing. So we'd love to explore that a little bit more. And then some workforce recruitment and training would be great. Michigan, obviously, we have many, many mills here, but some of the issues that they run into are tradespeople that they need for the mills. So as those folks leave the industry, whether through retirement or other means. It's getting harder and harder to replace those folks. So I'm not sure if any of the states in the US that are watching, or Finland, how you do workforce recruitment in some of those areas would be great. We don't want to see mills close here because of lack of workforce. We had a new mill, Aruco, that Donna will talk a little bit about, and needed 200 jobs or 200 bodies to fill 200 jobs, and that was quite a chore for them to do that. So, and that's up in the northern part of our Lower Peninsula in Michigan. I use my Michigan mitt here. It's kind of right here, the new Aruco plant. So that's one area where we would love to collaborate as well. And then probably the biggest thing for us right now, and I've talked with some of you on this webinar and some of the panelists, but we need some new technologies on some of the residuals. So the forest products industry here, there are quite a few residuals that come off of those mills. And one of the things I saw in Finland were sort of a really place-based economy where everything off of the mill is used on site. So the wood chips go in one area and are used to create another product, or the chips go in one area and create a new product. The bark goes in another area and creates a new product. And so these are all technologies that they've worked on or discovered, and that is sort of all in one place. And right now we have a huge residual issue here. Some of our cogen plants, we had 5 cogen plants, 2 of the 5 have gone down. So we're running into issues where we can't get rid of chips, and we're trying to, hi Dana, almost done. My last point here. We're trying to look at ways to help the mills in that residual conversation. So any help in those realms would be great. And yes, I would love to also, Dana mentioned this, we would love to go to Finland at some point for a trade mission, and that was supposed to be on the books, but we'll have to hold for that one for now. Thanks, Dana.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk more about that. Thank you so much, Shannon. So at this point, I'll say let's bring the full panel back in. You can open up your cameras. I'm going to have to disappear from the screen, but you'll hear my voice. And as you're coming back on screen, I'll just remind you that among the panelists, discussion is encouraged, and you may ask questions of one another. Audience, you may enter your questions in the questions box on your screen. We have had some questions coming in from the audience, and I will begin with a comment that I'll share, and then I will ask a question from the audience. First, the comment is, it says, as a founder of Arborgen, COO president of Cell4, British Columbia, and director of forestry biotechnology for Monsanto, I'm hoping to hear more about technology, genetics, silviculture, yield improvement, disease management, etc. And then it's very complimentary about the webinar and is really enjoying it, which is great. But just to put that out there in case there's anyone who can speak to some of this more technical stuff during the webinar today. The question here is excellent, because I was trying to formulate a very similar question. It's mostly to US speakers, but Finland might have some ideas here. And the question is, how can federal funding or policy be used to create a more consortium-based approach to innovation, similar to the EU model? And I'll add to that, I know I put down in my notes as Permanent Secretary Husukallio was speaking, I underscored, she said, everything starts from the strategy. Finland has both a bioeconomy and a forest strategy, and they work from it, and it's a dynamic document. And also said that it relates to the EU forest and bioeconomy strategy. So I will put that out there and leave you with that question, and who would like to respond?
I can say a couple of things. Thanks. I don't know if I've got it completely right, but certainly federal funding and federal priorities are critically important. And I mean, one good example of sort of a more collaborative approach was the Economic Development Administration funding that Maine received to help deal with some of the challenges our forest industry was going through. And Finland became an important collaborator on that in terms of, you know, we were able to share ideas, learn from what they were doing there, since many of the similar issues of closing of paper mills and having a large part of your territory forested was similar between them and us. And obviously, thank you very much, Finland. You're a wealth of information, and we're really grateful for that. So I think some of that EDA funding, which is really directed towards thinking about economic development, I think Forest Service funding in the United States is critically important because it's the way many of the programs that are there at the Forest Service. One's called Community Wood and Innovations Program, National Agroforestry Center. All these things have to operate on relatively small budgets, and one of our challenges in the United States is that they're increasingly smaller because a lot of Forest Service money goes to battling forest fires. So we have to keep that in balance. But I think there are many ways to do this, and a lot of this policy is written through the Farm Bill, as well as through the Agricultural Committee, and then funded through the Interior Committee. And my colleague may have other thoughts about it because he's, the caucus chair and is working on these things too.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'll piggyback off of what Shelley was saying, but we actually have a lot of collaborative efforts in the U.S. already through the Forest Service. We do a lot of work through the state and private forestry program with state forestry departments. That's been very successful. I think we need to focus more funding on that because if you look across the country, we have more private land than we have public land, and if we don't manage these private forests, we're losing ground on that. We've also got the Forest Products Lab, and we've implemented some new policies recently that foster even more collaboration internally to the U.S. through programs like the Good Neighbor Authority, which I think Shannon has worked on that in Michigan, which it gets, again, the state level forestry groups working with the Forest Service to do management on the public lands. And Shelley mentioned a very important issue, and that has to do with the cost of fight fires. So much of our federal funding goes to fire suppression, and we should be investing that on the front end. An ounce of prevention is definitely worth a pound of cure. We're spending billions of dollars to put fires out. If we could focus that money on doing sustainable management, we could reduce that much better, and that obviously takes a collaborative effort. As far as policy, if you look at the Trillion Trees Act, we've got a section in there for a sustainable building tax credit. We all know that wood is one of the most sustainable building materials out there. It uses less energy to produce it, less energy to transport it to where it's used. It is a great insulating material, and it also stores carbon over the long term. And Shannon had mentioned something about a carbon trading program. The language in the Trillion Trees Act would actually give a building a U.S. government issued certification on the amount of carbon in the building, and that could be a tool that could be used to trade carbon in some kind of a market that would be formed. As far as internationally, again, the Trillion Trees Act, we have programs in there to help other countries plant trees. We obviously can't plant 1 trillion trees here in the U.S., but we want to work through USAID and other programs to help plant trees around the world.
Thank you.
If you, Dana, allow me as well to say that exactly as we heard from your part, also in Finland, it is the private people that own the forests. The state is really a minor player in that area. So individual forest owners, they decide what to do with their forests. But it's clear, as I tried to explain, that we need a national strategy. So for the government, it is important to make it possible, both to earn money and at the same time to preserve the nature. And that is why I'm extremely proud of the stakeholder involvement to do the job. But when I was listening to all of you and Shannon, I think everything that you said, I only thought that, for instance, for our cooperation, we have to make a choice. We cannot do everything, and neither can any country do everything. So you have to have a step-by-step approach. And one thing that I forgot to mention that I want to add, which we are very proud of Finland, is the data collection. We have a very sophisticated system now in Finland that we know what our forests are. So we really do e-commerce when people are selling their trees, and how we collect the data on a national basis is super good in my opinion. And that is also something that I forgot, I'm sorry, to mention, but really, you know, national and I assume on the state basis in the US, you definitely, and we all need you know, to make it possible for the owners to do the right job.
Thank you, Jana. Yeah, you're incredibly well coordinated with the data collection. And is it 1 in 5 people in Finland own forest? I think it is.
Indeed, and it is increasing. It's increasing. So more and more people in the capital area are now forest owners. So definitely, indeed.
Amazing.
Dana, could I ask a question of my fellow presenters?
Of course.
And I think it builds on what Jana just said, and maybe this isn't an issue in Finland, but I think we've all said to some degree that our forestry industries are based on a lot of private ownership of forest land. And are there ideas for policy or other types of strategies that folks are thinking about in terms of succession of ownership? So bringing the next generation along and getting them interested in being forest landowners.
Yes, Ruth Westerman.
Great question. You know, if you look at private forest ownership, the #1 thing that is needed to keep forest land forested are markets, so that the forest land retains its highest and best use as forest land. So that's why it's so critical to work on research and development and look for new markets, and you know, come up with the products of the future that can be made from a renewable, sustainable resource, whether that's mass timber buildings or new kinds of bioenergy, or was talked about earlier about nanomaterials. We have a wide open future ahead of us, but we have to invest in the research and the development to get these markets there, because studies show that when markets go away and there's no value in timberland, on private timberland, that's when you have you're subject to lose that to development or other uses.
A musical interlude. I don't know where that came from.
I thought that was my key to end the answer.
It's not the Emmy Awards. I want to put one last question out there before we move to the next panel. This just came in from the audience, and the question is, given COVID-19, what sort of federal policies can be created to help forest-based businesses survive? What will be a massive supply chain disruption in the next year or more? So anticipating a massive supply chain, what policies can we put in place to get through this? And maybe Finland has some ideas as well. Congresswoman Pingree, I think you're muted.
Yeah. Sorry.
There you go.
Very quickly. I mean, I think that's been the challenge for the entire Congress since we've been trying to look at funding bills, really at all aspects of our economy and keeping people in the workforce. I don't think we've thought as much about specifically to the forest industry, but many of the programs that we've implemented, like small business administration loans, one's called the PPP Payroll Protection Program, more availability of unemployment for people who have to stop work, but more than anything else, just helping to keep those businesses intact until either their market recovers or you know, they can kind of move on to the next stage. But it is very concerning, because I think we were already worried about having insufficient workforce, you know, financial challenges in this industry, and I'm worried too about in Maine in particular. We've got some really great projects on the coming down the horizon. One of them is the you know, wood fibered insulation, but they all require a lot of investment. They, you know, need private backing, and I don't know how those sort of new ideas will be impacted by you know, challenges in the stock market or just general funding challenges. So I'm sure that's true in many places, and we kind of have to look at it all on all fronts. But it's certainly, I think, a big concern of you know, everyone in Congress right now.
Thank you. Congressman?
Yeah, just briefly, I'll say that, again, markets are crucial. We saw the importance. I think people have a new appreciation for tissue paper, the run on toilet paper that we saw at the beginning of the pandemic. And I think it reminded people just how important forest products are. But we had an issue in America before the pandemic came along. We had a low supply of housing. We had increased prices in housing and increased demands for housing. We have urban areas that need to be rebuilt. And I think we've got a great opportunity if we look at some kind of an infrastructure package to incentivize using domestically grown wood products to rebuild our country and to create affordable, sustainable housing. And those are some policy issues that I want to focus on as we look at how we recover from the pandemic.
Okay.
Dana, from the Finnish point of view, I'm happy to say that what we are doing on a national basis is now a strategy for the exit from COVID-19, and I'm a member of the civil servant panel, and our deadline is in the end of this week. And how we did it in our sector was that our National Forest Council was also led by my minister, and we had a detailed discussion of the steps to be taken in that area, and that is part of the work. So in a nutshell to say, let's keep going, let's keep the engine running, and as you have been emphasizing the construction, and as I said, you know, using more wood in building is also one of the things that we are putting more and more efforts in Finland, in addition, of course, to the taking care of the export of our products. But indeed, that was an excellent question, and we have to take care of that after and when we get rid of the crisis situation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So we do have to move on to the next panel. If this were live, this would be the point where everyone would be applauding. So thank you to our panel one speakers. At this point, I do want to thank everyone who submitted questions and keep doing that. I think we have about 15 questions that came in, so we do have plans to kind of continue this conversation through our network after the program. So we'll get back to some of those questions for you, and we'll find a way to link everyone together. So thank you. People were very interested, and this was super engaging. I learned a lot. So you may turn off your cameras. And next, we will be on to panel 2, which is creating a business case and catalyzing green growth in sustainable forest bioeconomy. So as before, I will briefly introduce each of our panelists, and then each panelist will have 7 minutes to present, followed by discussion and questions from the audience. So I'll briefly introduce our speakers here. Panel 2, we'll have Mr. Peter Wareheim, who's head of the Bioeconomy and Food Systems Unit and Directorate General for Research and Innovation at the European Commission. Since 2004, he's worked with agricultural related projects and received his doctoral degree in agricultural economics in Germany. Next, we'll have Mr. Antti Asikainen, Executive Vice President of Research at the Natural Resources Institute of Finland, also known as LUCA. He has worked as a professor in forest technology since 2001, including research areas of biomass availability and policy studies, wood harvesting technologies, and logistics. Ms. Donna Lacourte is with us, and she is the Forest Product Economic Development Specialist at the Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development, and has been since 2014. She specializes in forest products and international trade. Donna, when I read that, I knew we had to talk more. That's great. Mr. Jarmo Heinonen is Senior Director for Business Ecosystems, Biocircular Economy, and Clean Tech at Business Finland. He's worked there for the past 20 years, and I think it was known as TICAS before it was Business Finland, and has gained strong innovation, strategy, financing, and business internationalization skills during his time there. And then Mr. Peter McKeith is Dean and Professor of Architecture at the Fay Jones School of Architecture and Design at the University of Arkansas. Professor McKeith is a nationally recognized design educator and administrator, and also former honorary consul of Finland for the state of Missouri. And we have Ms. Charlotte Mace, who's Director of the Office of Business Development at Maine's Department of Economic and Community Development. Her previous work includes working with developing Maine's bioeconomy strategy and legislation, and she's presenting here today on behalf of Maine's Forest Opportunity Roadmap Coalition. We'll begin with Mr. Peter Wareheim. I was going to say you were joining us by phone from Brussels, but I see you on screen now. So the screen is yours, Peter. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Dana. I hope you can understand me. It's really, yeah, good morning to those of you who are in the US, and good afternoon to those who are taking part from Europe. Thanks for inviting me. Thanks for inviting someone from the European Union, from the European Commission, to take part in this webinar and panel. It's really great pleasure to be part of this debate with colleagues from the US and Finland. I did not have the pleasure yet to visit the forest in Arkansas, but I have visited Michigan. I studied there at the Michigan State University. I've been in Maine, I've been in Finland, and they are among my favorite destinations in the world. And I think simply because they have one thing in common, really beautiful forests. Inside the Commission, I have been working on forests also for a long time, first from the climate perspective, and now I'm in the Research and Innovation Department, where I'm working on the EU's bioeconomy strategy. So overall, it's a really pleasure to take part in this discussion. The question for this panel is how can we create new business cases for the bioeconomy and thereby catalyze green growth? Let me try to make 3 to 4 remarks in that respect. First, as an introduction, again, let me also mention a few facts and figures about forests and the bioeconomy. Overall, in Europe, we have already heard some figures about Finland, but it's also clear that forests are very important in the EU, and they are increasingly recognized as a great asset for the economy, but also for the society overall. Yet they are also under great stress through climate change in the member state, which I know best in Germany. Forests are currently really significantly hampered by climate change and associated pests like the bark beetle pest. But overall, forests are also very important in Europe. In the EU, they cover about 38% of the total land surface. The net annual increment in European forests is more than 400 million tons per year. And of that increment, only about 300 million tons are felled and harvested. Hence, we have a higher increment than what we harvest, which is of course good from climate point of view. The EU roundwood production is about 490 million cubic meters. That was in 2018. We have 2.5 to 3 million people employed in the forest value chain, and the gross value added of wood-based industries was more than 130 billion, or 7% of the total manufacturing industry in 2018. I want to say forests are also all over Europe a very important sector. However, that was the forest part of the bioeconomy. In fact, our definition of the bioeconomy is relatively wide. And when we speak about the bioeconomy, we are talking about all sectors and systems that use, produce, process, and are driven by biological resources. As mentioned by Congresswoman Pingree, farms and forests work together and this is particularly important also in the context of the bioeconomy, where both farmers and foresters are producers of biomass, but they can also be part of the value chain, and that's very important. So if we look at that wider definition of the bioeconomy, the bioeconomy in the EU has a turnover value of more than 2 trillion per annum and accounts for more than 8% of the EU workforce. Now, it's one of the panelists in the first panel also said everything starts with a strategy, and hence also my second remark relates to the policy context. As on many other policy areas, we have multiple layers, governance layers related to the bioeconomy and forests in the EU, based on what we call the principle of subsidiarity. We have EU legislation and member states legislation, but the implementation of the forest policies itself clearly remains a national competence. Each member state is responsible to implement its own forest policy, because the conditions of forests in the 27 member states are simply very, very different. Hence, we also have a bioeconomy strategy. We have updated our bioeconomy strategy in 2018. That's the title. I have also included a link for that in the presentation, which will be circulated after the meeting. This updated bioeconomy strategy from 2018 is an umbrella strategy for the European Union. It links the sustainable production and use of renewable biological resources for food, feed, bio-based product, and bioenergy with the protection and restoration of biodiversity, ecosystems, and natural capital across land and water. It's, as I said, an EU strategy. It's trying to incentivize also all member states to develop national bioeconomy strategies. You have heard from Finland that they have a long tradition, of course, in having a national strategy overall. End of last year, we had 9 member states who had national bioeconomy strategies, so that each member state could select also the strengths and weaknesses in the bioeconomy and address them. But we also have many member states, specifically from Central Eastern European countries, who have not fully developed their bioeconomy strategies, and this is a work in progress. A second remark on the policy context was mentioned by Ambassador Lambrinidis earlier in the seminar. It is the European Green Deal. In November last year, as you may know, a new commission took office with President von der Leyen being our new president. And the first policy initiative she launched was what we in Europe are calling a European Green Deal. Dana, maybe you could indicate how much more time I have.
Just about done. So just need to wrap up, and we'll go on to Mr. Antti.
Okay. So we have the European Green Deal. From our point of view, the bioeconomy is firmly enshrined. It's a catalyst for systemic change, tackles holistically the economic, social, environmental aspects of the Green Deal. The climate dimension has already been mentioned. The Green Deal indicates that the EU wants to be climate neutral also by 2050. Again, our analysis behind the European Commission's Clean Planet Strategy for All clearly highlights the potential of the bioeconomy as one of the 7 building blocks towards climate neutrality. The use of 1 ton of wood instead of 1 ton of concrete in construction can lead up to 2.1 tons carbon dioxide emission reduction. So great potential. In our bioeconomy strategy, we have an action plan which also gives an important role to research and innovation. to boost the development of bio-based industries, boost also the creation of new business opportunities in the bioeconomy. It indicates support mechanisms to provide finance to innovators in the bioeconomy, which helps them to de-risk innovation, including through financial instruments. It also addresses the role of consumers to boost market uptake and consumer confidence through, for instance, standardized environmental impact assessments, life cycle assessments of the new products that also come from the bio-based industries. So these, and of course, we also are supporting educational measures. Let me just lastly mention that we also have a European Bioeconomy University, which is in the lines of 6 different lovely universities, something like former land-grant colleges, University of Eastern Finland, Hohenheim in Germany, or Wageningen in the Netherlands. There are any students listening in, I would invite them to also come to Europe to participate in master study programs that offer great opportunities. Let me stop here. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. We should all be looking at that document, and very interesting to learn about the bioeconomy universities. I had actually taken an online class from Wageningen that was quite good, but I didn't realize it was part of that network. That's excellent. All right. Well, thank you, Peter. Next, we have Mr. Antti Asikainen from the Natural Resources Institute, Finland. Luca. Welcome, Antti.
Thank you. So in 1970s, I learned from my older colleagues that all of them went to US to study both forest engineering, the wood sourcing, and then also the pulp and paper industry best expertise was in US. And gradually it has maybe shifted towards Europe, and today we hope that we can provide you something in that respect. In 1990s, Finland started a very strong bioenergy program. It was motivated by the fact that we were very, very dependent on imported oil. And it took about 10 years, very persistent, very committed R&D and innovation work where academia, enterprises, and then also the public administration worked closely together. And after 10 years, the production of bio-based energy, wood-based energy, really skyrocketed. But it took more than 10 years and tens or hundreds of millions of euros R&D. And now we have been switching from bioenergy to bioeconomy about 10 years ago, as Peter said, and gradually shifting to circular economy or bioeconomy. Really, the challenge that was mentioned many times, for instance, by Shannon, was the fact that once you are starting the mechanical wood processing, producing houses of wood, you end up having a massive amount of residuals. And they are stockpiling if you don't have any uses or if the pulp and paper industry has disappeared. Eastern Europe was in that situation when they joined European Union, or a little bit before that, and they had literally mountains of sawdust and bark and other residues. There were a number of projects, and I was also involved a few of those, but there the solution was conversion to pellets and replacement of heavy fuel oil with domestic residual fuels. And although bioenergy is a really low grade, has a low value, but if the raw material has negative price, if it's a sort of waste, then it's really meaningful to use it for energy generation, not necessarily electricity, but in places like northernmost parts of Michigan, probably also in other states mentioned before, there is still room for space heating based on residual forest biomass. And then Peter also mentioned, a number of other before that, you need a body of expertise. You need experts to be trained and who can then develop and run the business. And that is really needed. And today, many of the plant managers running these pilots and planning these textile pilot plant mills in Finland, they have been actually running R&D programs about a decade ago in the bioeconomy program that we started around year 2010. So you need academia, you need education, you really need universities, as was said by the previous speaker. Then finally, the bioeconomy program that European Union had and still has after the first wave in Katainen's cabinet's conclusion was that without investments, there is nothing. And you have to be able to raise plants bigger or smaller, and without that, bioeconomy doesn't go forward. And because I'm coming from the raw material sourcing side, I have seen that especially the primary processing, like Äänekoski pulp mill and biorefinery in Äänekoski, and many other projects, they are first looking secure availability of sustainable feedstock over 30 years minimum. And if you can guarantee that in reasonable price, if you are supporting the infrastructure around the investment, the investors are there and the technology is there. The matter is just bringing all that together, and that I see as a challenge for you right now. And I think that if finally I want to say that the forest harvesting and the using of wood, this was also mentioned already in this policy session, it is one of the best guarantees to preserve and maintain and keep your forest resources living today in this changing climate. And we can provide technologies for selective cutting, for thinnings, for extraction or the fuel treatment, as you call it, to reduce the forest biomass, not to grow too big, so that if the fire comes or if there is an insect outbreak, it is uncontrollable and you will lose the whole growing stock and at the same time the carbon stock that you have stockpiled there. So using of wood in a reasonable way, in an optimized way for climate, for bioeconomy and for biodiversity is something that we should look after. And there I believe that we can co-create a lot, and Luke, the Natural Resource Institute Finland, wants to work with you in that challenge. Thank you.
Thank you, Antti. Before we move on, I just wanted to go back to something you said. You mentioned Metso's Äänekoski mill and said that, I want to make sure I understood you correctly. You were saying that their feedstock, they're guaranteeing for 30 years minimum. So for those who don't know, the Äänekoski mill is a Metsä fiber facility in Äänekoski, Finland. It's a huge pulp mill, but it was built in 2017 with the intention that they would attract off-takers to invest around the facility to utilize waste streams to create things as diverse as, I think, food additives and medical products and textiles. But were you saying that it was because they could guarantee that feedstock, if you will, for 30 years that they were successful in getting investments?
Of course, there are many other reasons mentioned also before. You need labor, infrastructure, stability of the society, that everything works. But in the end of the day, it's the matter of raw material resources, because you can't transport timber very, very long distances. And right now, when there are big investments on the planning board, they are all looking very carefully the raw material sourcing. And as I have understood, I mean, cubic meter wise or volume wise, you have a lot of growing stock. Of course, that needs to be evaluated, and then we need to evaluate what's the price, dollars per square cubic feet of timber or lumber delivered at the plant, by which technologies, but it's really decisive factor, the availability of feedstock.
Okay, thank you, Antti. Okay,
Thanks.
so our next panelist is Ms. Donna LaCourte, and she's with the Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development. Donna, welcome.
Thank you, Dana, and ambassadors and distinguished panelists for having the opportunity to be part of this exchange today. I'd like to share a little bit of background on Michigan's forest bioeconomy, as well as some challenges and opportunities. Michigan's forest products sector contributes about $20.2 billion to our economy annually and supports 91,000 jobs. Those are direct and indirect. And we have just under $500 million of exports as in 2019. It's interesting to note that the direct jobs represent about 5.5% of our state's manufacturing jobs, which is really dominated by our transportation equipment, metal fabricating, and machinery sectors. And these numbers are on a comparable basis to the data that Amanda Beal mentioned earlier for Maine. Very important to our bioeconomy are Michigan's over 19 million acres of sustainably managed timberland, the 5th largest in the nation, which also includes the largest state-managed forest in the nation with over 4 million acres that are both third-party certified to both Forest Stewardship Council and Sustainable Forestry Initiative standards. Interestingly, about 70% of our economic contribution comes from Michigan's southern lower peninsula, where the majority of our population of 10 million folks live, while most of our forests in the northern parts of the state. Our wood, office, and institutional furniture and our shelving manufacturers, and most of the secondary paperboard and other secondary paper manufacturing are in the southern lower peninsula, and that accounts for over 50% of the total economic contribution. So lots in that secondary value add part of the sector. In fact, our wood, office, and institutional furniture and shelving group stands out for performance as it's the largest and growing the fastest compared to other states. We have a Timber and Forest Products Advisory Council comprised of representatives from industry, universities, and conservation groups that provide counsel to the Michigan Department of Natural Resources on policies, procedures, issues, and things of that nature related to timber and forest products, and also facilitates coordination with the DNR, the governor, the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, and the Michigan Department of Ag and Rural Development. The council helps establish our longer-term goals for 2023 is to grow to 23 billion economic contribution and 46,000 direct jobs and 615 million exports. In addition, we have our Michigan Forest Biomaterials Institute has been instrumental in convening our state, national, international stakeholders and our experts and industry to identify opportunities to enhance our quality of life in Michigan by fostering sustainable forests and communities and economies through innovative and responsible production, use, and recycling of forest biomaterials. It's been exciting to be part of the summits and working groups through this organization that have sown seeds that now we're building on through our developing collaboration with Michigan's MOU with Finland. So to be able to keep growing this economic contribution, we need to add more value to our forest products before they leave the state for domestic or international markets. And that includes our strategy that we look for ways to use more Michigan wood in value-added manufacturing in both the upper and lower peninsulas, recruiting new value-added manufacturers that complement the supply chain, and retaining our existing businesses and supporting their growth, and then also strengthening our bottlenecks. As Shannon mentioned earlier, an example of this strategy in action was the attraction of Araco to Michigan, where they developed a particle board mill. Our supply chain desperately needed an outlet for softwood pulpwood, and the wood, office, and institutional furniture and shelving businesses needed a closer particle board sourcing option. So it was a really good fit. But keeping an eye on that supply chain is so important. And although you could say that our supply chain overall is somewhat in balance, but we have to stay vigilant because, as we all know, and we saw through the Maine experience, that you can just be one paper mill loss away from a total supply chain upset. So we really need to look for those ways to add additional value-added products to our existing manufacturing to make them more competitive and help build that opportunity for Michigan. As Shannon mentioned, we're also seeking new markets and value-added manufacturing for our lumber, like mass timber. And it would be awesome if we could make such products from hardwood lumber because we are a hardwood state, 69%. With Finland's world-class expertise and integrated forest products manufacturing, and I had the wonderful opportunity to live there for almost 2 years and see it in action and experience now the development of many new novel products from wood in Finland, and not to mention, as was already discussed earlier by Shannon and others, there's such an orchestrated pursuit of the overall picture in Finland and strategy combining climate, smart carbon cycles, adaptive and resilient bioeconomy, profitable and responsible primary production, and the overall circular bioeconomy. So it'll be great to learn and be able to fold that into our overall actions and culture like Finland does. And we're looking forward to developing those exchanges that can benefit both Finland and Michigan, as well as identifying opportunities in exchanges with other states. In Michigan, we know how to make things, but we look to collaborate to make more from wood. Just some parting thoughts. Perhaps we could facilitate introduction of new wood-based value-added products in Michigan via exports from businesses in Finland. And that could be a foundation to help build markets and associated business cases for investment. Like Antti mentioned earlier, it all doesn't happen unless we can foster that investment and make it clear that there's a return on investment for those that are coming to table with the capital needed to go to a commercial level. Collaborating on between universities and research institutions to accelerate new product development is also something that we're looking to finding some win-wins. So thank you and look forward to our discussion.
Thanks so much, Donna. Lots of ideas from you for what we can follow up on for sure. Good stuff. I would like to welcome Peter McKeith to the screen from University of Arkansas.
Good morning and good afternoon, or should I say hyvää huomenta ja hyvää päivää kaikille. It's a great pleasure to be with everyone on this panel, and certainly a pleasure to follow after Congressman Westerman and those on the first panel to give you a sense of not only what I would say we're doing here in Arkansas and at the University of Arkansas, but in a way at the university and academic level, really across the United States and North America. It is a pivotal moment, and as I'll detail, I think Finland and the Finnish model, the Finnish example, offers us all great lessons by which to advance this general cause. As Congressman Westerman has already detailed, Arkansas is in many ways best understood as a forested state, as a forest economy. And in this sense, we have very similar conditions and issues as my colleagues in Maine and Michigan do. This is a very dependent state economy on timber and wood products industries. And therefore, and through that, we're connected into housing, manufacturing, consumer goods. Arkansas sits in the middle of what I think is now understood as the southern yellow pine fiber basket of the southeastern United States, potentially the future of forests altogether in these latitudes, and therefore offers itself, I think, as a case study and certainly as a productive one in how to look ahead together towards a more productive future. It is so that for all of the prevalence of timber and wood products in the state economy and the overall health of Arkansas's forests, currently it is fair to say that growth is outpacing use, and that Arkansas, like many other states in the U.S., is experiencing a surplus production, right now running about 15 million tons of surplus per year. We need to see surplus as a challenge, certainly, of environmental and economic character, but we also need to see surplus as an opportunity. And when I arrived to Arkansas and to the Fay Jones School at this university 6 years ago, I understood very quickly the forest character of this state and the reliance it had upon the timber and wood products industry. And I asked a very simple question to my colleagues, my students, as well as our faculty, and really those across the university and the state. And the question is this: what does it mean to be the School of Architecture and Design, a public land-grant university-centered school of design in a state that is predominantly covered in forest and reliant upon its timber and wood products industries? Innovation only emerges through design thinking, however we understand design to be applied. And I believe it was time for the Fay Jones School of Architecture and Design to step forward and serve the people of the state, serve the interests of the state by attempting, working with others, to address this pressing economic and environmental issue of surplus production and a timber and forest reliant state economy. We have moved deliberately, but in fact quite rapidly, I would say, over the last 5 to 6 years to implement this. And how have we done this so rapidly? I would say, given my 30 years of living, working, and overall coming to understand the culture of Finland since 1990, I believe that we have used in many ways the Finnish model here in Arkansas in order to begin to develop a much more productive timber and wood product industry. The Finnish model, as you're hearing and as we are appreciating, is a set of partnerships and alliances that begin in the forests, begin with private landowners, begin with rural agricultural communities, that builds up through government, industry, academia, all together. And it's that type of partnership that I felt we could develop here in Arkansas, given the intimacy of the state, the strong relationships that exist amongst the citizens of the state. And over the course of the last 5 to 6 years, we've managed to draw together, as you've heard already, our congressional delegation, both our senators and our congresspeople, led by Congressman Westerman, Governor Hutchinson, and the Arkansas Economic Development Commission, private timberland owners, including the Anthony family and the Whipple family, and corporate partners such as Walmart, and going down into the architecture, engineering, and contracting communities. These types of alliances are essential as we go forward, and it's those types of alliances that I know have really brought Finland back to its current position of prominence in world forest, world timber, world wood products industries altogether. In this effort, I've been joined not only in the School of Architecture, but together with our College of Engineering and with our School of Forestry and Natural Resources in Monticello, Arkansas. In fact, one of the lead professors in Forestry and Natural Resources in Monticello is Matthew Pelkey, himself a graduate of the University of Michigan. Thank you, Michigan, but himself also a second generation Finnish immigrant family here in the United States. So there is Finland in Arkansas in many ways, and it has really been to our benefit to partner with Professor Pelkey and his colleagues to understand the forest economy and what could come from the potentials of that economy. What can come is really, as you've heard already from others, new approaches, new products, value-added products, new applications for existing products, leading to new investment, new markets, new jobs, and certainly better ways of addressing the ongoing environmental conditions. I will say finally that while Arkansas has already a healthy wood product sector, we have now moved demonstratively into cross-laminated timber production. You've heard Congressman Westerman refer to Walmart and its commitment to mass timber construction with its new headquarters, but Walmart has also then partnered with Structure Lam from Canada to initiate the first cross-laminated timber production facility here in the Southeast in Conway, a $90 million investment that will start rolling panels next summer. We look ahead to, from the university, to partnerships nationwide with our partnerships across the university culture. But I look back to Finland, to the Finnish Forest Academy, to the ChemArts program at Aalto University, to Wood Technologies and Professor Hughes, to working with Luke, as we've heard already, and certainly to looking at the timber cities that are emerging in northern Finland, in Kuopio, for instance. There's a great deal to be done, but as I say, Finland has provided us the model, and we look forward to further partnerships beyond the point of inspiration into truly productive economic and environmental development. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. That is fantastic. I loved what you said, that there is Finland and Arkansas. Good stuff. So I'd like to invite Ms. Charlotte Mace to the screen. Charlotte is a dear colleague whom I admire, and really I credit with inviting Maine's attention to the opportunity that bioeconomy presents us with here. So with that, Charlotte, the screen is yours.
Thanks, Dana. I know that we're behind time, so I'll try to make this brief. My name is Charlotte Mace. I'm the Director of the Office of Business Development for the Maine Department of Economic and Community Development. On behalf of Governor Janet Mills and Commissioner Heather Johnson, I would like to welcome you to this important event today, even though I'm the last speaker. So thank you for this event today. My day-to-day responsibilities, I'm responsible for helping Maine businesses to establish themselves and to grow. And my office is also charged with attracting new businesses to our state. And we're responsible for the state's entrepreneurial ecosystem and a newly developing domestic trade program. So we're very busy. And lately, as you can imagine, we have been deeply engaged in much more critical, urgent care for businesses of all sizes during this pandemic. As we work to fully reopen our economy, we're trying our best to help businesses imagine the future where they can thrive again, but also attempting to balance industry needs and public health. A few quick facts about Maine's forest industry. Many of these facts were talked about by Commissioner Beal, but I just wanted to reiterate that Maine's forest industry is an anchor part of our economy. It employs nearly 40,000 people, contributes over $8 billion annually to the state's economy. We have 18 million forested acres, 90% of which is privately owned. That's a huge advantage to us globally as we seek to attract investment. You can access a lot of fiber talking to a small amount of people. Much of that fiber is sustainable certified through FSC or SFI. That's very important. Pulp and paper manufacturing is our largest sector at 60%. Solid wood lumber, particle board, that's about 25%. So the focus of my remarks today will be around the coalition that we established back in 2017 called Forest Opportunity Roadmap Maine, or For Maine. And this brought together a wide variety of groups, industry, and that includes mills, landowners, loggers, government, university, and community representatives. And we wanted to establish a vision for Maine's forest industry and sort of press the reset button after a slew of pulp and paper mill closures. And our desire was really to diversify the industry as much as possible. We used to have a small biomass energy industry, and that was a huge part of our forest industry, and that used up about 5 million tons per year of our wood residuals. We still have that infrastructure, but the economics of a standalone biomass energy facility are very poor. So we've lost those markets for that residual. So similar to the situation in other states, our sawmills are actively looking for new uses for residuals, sawdust and bark primarily. So For Maine has been keenly interested in that question. You know, we knew as a coalition that we had to act and be very strategic and thoughtful and also aggressive if we were going to grow our forest industry. And our goal was to grow it from 8.5 billion to 12 billion in just a few years. We received federal funding, we formed subcommittees, and we worked very, very hard. We have a monthly committee and subcommittee activities, and we're now actually entering phase 2 of our work, which is the implementation phase. Doing a lot of work on investment attraction and workforce in particular right now. And I would encourage you to go to the 4Maine website to get more information. I think there's also some materials that we distributed before the event today. And we've had some challenges over the past 4 years since we started this coalition. Global decline in pulp prices, an unfortunate explosion at the mill, one of our pulp and paper mills that handles roughly 14% of our wood harvest every year. And perhaps our biggest challenge as we try to diversify is the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's unwillingness to consider the state of Maine's wood fiber as renewable biomass for the purposes of producing climate-friendly biofuel under the renewable fuel standard. This is something we're working on diligently, and we have been for years. And then the latest challenge, of course, is this global pandemic, which has wreaked havoc on global markets. Although there is good news, lumber futures are up, so that's a very good news for the state of Maine, as lumber is the first starting point of our forest industry. And you know, for all of those challenges that we've experienced, we've had some remarkable successes. Since 2018, we've had over $1 billion in new capital investments, primarily to diversify our pulp and paper mills into containerboard, packaging, and tissue production lines. We've passed groundbreaking legislation that offers a production tax credit for renewable chemicals at 8 cents per pound, which I'm pretty sure outcompetes any other US state. This legislation also reinstates a unique to Maine biofuel tax credit at 5 cents per gallon. We have a new wood insulation facility coming online in 2020 that makes eco-friendly insulation made from softwood fiber. I think Congresswoman Shelley Pingree mentioned that. So we're very excited about that. And we had 2 new softwood lumber facilities coming online in 2020, a new tissue production facility in 2019 for converting tissue, very important in these days. And then, so just a little bit about what 4Maine is doing for investment attraction. You know, we're very committed to the businesses that are already in Maine, and we want to attract new investment to the state that aligns with those businesses and also aligns with our resource. So we're working very closely with a consultant to help us with very strategic investment attraction efforts. I've mentioned we have a bunch of unused fiber, essentially, low quality fiber, low quality residuals, about 3 million tons actually. There are a lot of things that we can do with that. We're in particular looking at LVL, MDF, cross-laminated timber. I know that's been talked about a lot today. That remains a very viable opportunity for the state of Maine. We have close proximity to very active building and construction markets in the Northeast, and I think that's incredibly relevant. So we're working on that. And then also the circular economy, all the products that can be made with wood, which I know that we're all aware of, and there are so many that everyone is very excited about: bio-based plastics and cellulosic sugars and nanocellulose. But and I think that will be accelerated by the recent state legislation that the governor just passed for our production tax credit. But I really think that our success will only come if the people of rural Maine are able to get their fair share of the federal subsidy through the renewable fuel standard at the federal level. So with that, I will wrap it up. I'm very grateful to be included today. We have so much to learn from Finland's experiences and their examples, and we've already learned so much about you so far. And for phase 2 of 4Maine's work, involves more global outreach and developing a stronger relationship with Finland, and sharing our experiences with the goal of building the most value from our natural forest resources, both for the forest and for our communities. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Charlotte, so much. We do have one additional panelist here, and that's Mr. Jarmo Heinonen from Business Finland, a very close partner of Maine. Welcome, Jarmo.
Thank you, Dana, and good morning and good afternoon, everyone. So I'm first giving brief introduction of the organization where I come from. So Business Finland, Dana already mentioned that Business Finland used to be Tekes, or Tekes and Finpro actually merged together a couple of years ago. And we are anyway national agency under of the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Employment. We are the main innovation funder, but our role is also to promote, export innovation naturally, but also attract investments to Finland. And so we are initiating innovation actions that challenging industries, companies, create new innovative businesses, helping startup companies, small and medium enterprises to grow, go global, and large companies to renew their businesses. In the beginning of this webinar, actually, our ambassador, Kauppi, introduced briefly our strategy or target related to carbon neutrality. So our target is to be carbon neutral by 2035. So first nation country in the world. Aim is to also to be world first fossil-free welfare society in the world in the end of the 2030s. And to reach that target, there is a goal also to strengthen carbon sinks and stocks, which naturally relates to forests, and means that we need to have smart and sustainable forest management. Anyway, forest industry has a huge impact to Finnish economy. So it's major employer. 20% of the export is based on the forest industry products and services, bioeconomic products and services. And like mentioned several times, we have a forest. 80% of land area is covered by forest. So fact is that we have a plenty amount of raw material, valuable renewable source for sustainable businesses. So as a Business Finland, we have supported bioeconomy actions, or we have funded in recent 5 years around 300 million euros to bioeconomy sector, which usually means that we are launching programs, national programs. Usually those programs last 4 to 5 years, and the budget varies from 100 million euros to 150 million euros. At the moment, we have a program called Bio and Circular Finland going on. It's a 5-year program ending 2022, and budget is 150 million euros. And in those programs and existing program, we are challenging research field, but also the companies really to create new value products based on the biomass, improve the capabilities, especially for small and medium enterprises and startups when they go global. Like mentioned, there has been programs, and there has been actually tens of programs during last 10 years in the area of bioeconomy. And there has been huge transition going on. Everybody knows what kind of transition digitalization brings, or climate change, but also the decrease of consumption of the paper. and it has forced the forest industry really to look for the new business models. When we look back 15 years ago, 50 years in time, there wasn't actually so many startup companies existing in this sector. Although there was research related to new valuable products and biomass-based products, but something happened actually maybe less than 10 years ago. Suddenly in Finland we had several agile, young, innovative companies which were willing to and were able to create sustainable biomass-based products and services and businesses, and they were targeting to international markets. So why this happened? So there was clearly also a transition which changed the business environment, and maybe most remarkable reason was behind that large companies started to support also this kind of small enterprises, startups, and also to create that kind of business environment which was supporting the actions. So in Business Finland programs, we are also initiating the ecosystems, networks, and we are calling the most potential ecosystems high potential ecosystems. How we define high potential ecosystems? It's an ecosystem where organization, companies, research institutes, together they create a roadmap, strategy, of course, common actions, collaboration platform, but the point is that together they are looking for at least €1 billion new business or new value for businesses. And recently we have built several of these kind of ecosystems to Finland. One, this kind of really remarkable ecosystem is based on textiles and biomass and wood-based textiles. There is a long path from innovation to business. And when we look again a little bit back some years, maybe 12, 30 years ago, research started related to textiles. And now we are actually the demonstration phase. And there's many companies, small and medium enterprises, but also large enterprises, which are really putting effort in this sector and creating really novel value from the biomass and from the wood-based raw material. So when we are launching actions related to innovation, we are not funding research alone. We assume that companies are involved, companies are having their own project, but also we are encouraging them to international collaboration. And there has been mentioned several times today that there is states in USA or organizations which are willing to collaborate with the Finnish entities. We will welcome that definitely. So, and as a Business Finland would like to support that kind of actions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jarmo. And you ended on a great note. I think international cooperation and creating value is that's going to be part of the question that I put to the panel. So at this point, let's bring the full panel back on. And because we are running a bit over, I am going to put one question out to the panel that you can all feel free to jump in and answer before I make my closing remarks. Again, to the audience, there are fantastic questions coming through and so many of them. So I assure you that we'll keep these questions in order and get back to you with some thoughts and answers for you and keep this network going because it's really amazing. So with that, I'm going to take my camera off and I'm going to put a question to you that really is about value creation. Let me bring this up. This comes from the audience. There were many questions from the audience regarding what new technologies are being developed using forest bioproducts for packaging, fuels, and other products in collaboration with the forest industry. So the question is, are there joint projects between Finland and the US to develop some of these products? And then there was more of a general question as to what is possible. Tell us what's possible using biomaterials to create new products. What's the variety and what does it look like? Anyone want to take that? I saw Antti first. Go ahead.
Yeah, I take the latter question quick. The bioeconomy enables to produce practically everything that you are producing from oil-based raw materials. The weak part, how I see it, is the economy. The bio works well. We can produce anything, but really you have to make it profitable, and that's really the challenge. So the whole system has to be able to compete against fossil-based products. It doesn't make if it's a textile or if it's any other product.
Okay. Donna.
We're very enthusiastic about the discussions that we've been able to have with Luca, facilitated by Drs. Kettle and Saikkonen, related to using woody biomass in products, but we all have to get to the point of understanding the cost to customer and learning more from the journey that Finland had in that transition to getting the larger industries to want to invest in these kind of things, invest in the entrepreneurs. And we've seen some of those entrepreneurs come to Michigan as part of our Michigan Forest Biomaterials Institute summits. And how can we translate? We have to be cognizant of the cost to customer and that investment and that business case. But what can we learn from how Finland made that journey?
Okay. Peter.
Yes, let me just also underline that for the European Union, the bio-based industries really are simply a very big and important area, be it packaging materials like this one for food, which is based on wood-based fiber, textiles, or construction materials. We have created a bio-based industry partnership through also our Horizon 2020 research and innovation program to basically also develop a toolbox for these bio-based industries to make sure that the creation of the respective value-added chains can be replicated in many areas of Europe and are not only singular. We see this basically as an opportunity like 20 or 30 years ago, the renewable energy sector, where we also developed models which were then replicated and taken up by many industries.
Great, thank you. And I know our hosts are planning to share that toolbox with the audience as well.
Dana, I would just say with respect to the products, there is no green premium. Consumers are not willing to pay more for products that are made from plants rather than non-renewable materials. And I think when we see crude oil prices as low as they are, it's going to be very difficult to make that argument for investors for project financing and other projects. That said, we recognize that in the state of Maine, and we know that new industries need incentives, and that's why we're offering 8 cents per pound for manufacturing cellulosic sugars and renewable chemicals. I'll also mention that there are renewable chemicals and other bio-based products that you can make from woody biomass that you can't make from oil. So it's really interesting to think about those, thinking about products that have naturally have higher oxygen density, which does come from trees. So I think there's ways to think about that a lot more, but we do have to incentivize it, which the state of Maine has done. And we have to be really creative. Also thinking about a biorefinery model. So Typically, and I know in Finland, they know a ton about this, you have a commodity product at the center that makes a high volume products like biofuel, and then you have where the money is made in all the side stream products around the edges of the biorefinery. And that's why it's so critical for us to get the biofuel, the advanced biofuels moving in the state of Maine. So just another note about the biorefinery model.
Peter McKeith.
I would second everything that's been said. It's been very clear to me from the start of our university's engagement with this that the profit margins in the timber and wood products industry are so small as in the US as to almost prevent active R&D efforts emerging from the industry. And the universities, maybe particularly the land-grant public universities, are an avenue to advance R&D on behalf of either the state interests or the larger national interests. I think that's a value proposition that Finland has recognized early on, the partnerships with research institutes and with their universities in terms of advancing the overall cause. And as I say, this is something I think we can all make, all state universities can make in Michigan, Maine, Arkansas, elsewhere, a value proposition to timber and wood products to really actively work in these areas from nanotechnology all the way up to mass timber.
Thank you. Jarmo, final word.
Yes, like I actually mentioned in my speech that it's sometimes pretty long path when you're having a research innovation before you get a business. And especially nowadays related to climate change, the consumers also requires the products which are more sustainable, more environmental friendly, which actually brings this kind of novel products closer to and that way could be even a little bit more expensive, and still the people are buying those. So we are moving ahead step by step. Sometimes it takes time.
Okay. So I'll ask you to turn off your webcams at this point. Thank you very much. Again, this would be the point where you had a huge round of applause from the audience. Thank you, really, everyone, for excellent presentations and discussion. I'll make some closing remarks here and really just emphasize that we're coming away from this webinar experience as a network of experts. We should remain in touch, sharing information and best practices. All participants were asked during registration for the program whether you want to share your contact information for networking purposes, and I know that the questions have been coming in about that. People want to stay in touch and follow up. So all who replied yes will be added to a list that will be shared to all participants after the event, so you can feel free to reach out to one another for conversations. Also want to let you know that an article highlighting the main takeaways from today's event with video clips will be put on the Finnish Embassy website, which is finlandabroad.fi/USA a few days after the seminar, and we'll send you that link so you don't have to memorize that. You know, in terms of main takeaways, there were so many, and the embassy actually just sent me a long list of wonderful ideas. I had jotted down some ideas that I was hearing from all of the panelists about, you know, what our shared prospects for transatlantic cooperation in sustainable forest bioeconomy might be. How might we collaborate moving forward? I heard a lot about possible collaboration around mass timber related to policy and manufacturing. I heard several times about textiles innovation. Personal note, my daughter, who's graduating from high school next week, will be going to Parsons School of Design in New York City and will be an exchange student at Aalto University studying in their design program. So she hopes to spend her time in Finland working in the Chem Arts program, developing new textiles. So I'm very proud of that. Packaging materials was another one. Collaboration and coordination of strategy seemed important, that there's a lot we could learn from the EU and Finland and how they work together to coordinate their strategies. Forest management, carbon credits were another. Education of private landowners was another area where we could collaborate. Workforce training in mills was mentioned specifically. Lots of talk about residues. I know that that's an urgent issue for many of us, needing to find something to do with residuals that are piling up and are quite combustible. So finding new technology for residuals, for developing new products, data collection, best practices, and above all, value creation. How do we work together to fast track this product development using biomaterials? And lastly, I know that Michigan has a couple of excellent events every year. I think there's a bioeconomy event, and there are plans for a virtual mass timber event. So as much as we can come together in these public fora to have discussions like this again and again, I think that can only be a good thing. So as next steps, I think it was Shannon from Michigan who said we should have a call to action at the end of this webinar, and I agree. So as a next step, I would propose that we could assemble an informal transatlantic forest bioeconomy working group. I'll explore this idea with our partners and the hosts to see if there's interest. And also, I had mentioned in my opening remarks that we recently had to postpone a trade and study mission to Finland, which would have been a forest bioeconomy focused mission. And we've decided to adapt during these exceptional times, and in partnership with the Embassy of Finland in the US, with Finland's Ministry of Forestry and Agriculture, with Luca, and with Business Finland, we're looking to take this online. And so we're going to condense a week-long trade mission into probably 2 webinars. And I would invite the panelists and audience members to participate in these events and join us on this virtual journey where we examine the Finnish model and figure out what we have to offer there as well. So you'll hear more about it because we do plan to keep this network alive and working. In closing, I want to say thank you to our hosts, the Embassy of Finland in the US and the EU delegation to the United States in Washington, DC. I want to give special thanks to Ambassador Kauppi for her friendship and cooperation during her tenure here in the US. She's preparing to move on to her next assignment in Geneva. And I just want to say, Kiitos, Ambassador, you will be missed. It's been wonderful working with you. So with that, on behalf of our hosts and presenters, and yours truly, you're the moderator, thank you all for your participation and attention. We wish you good health and a good day.